Widowed businessman vowed never to love again until he saw a waitress looking after his daughter. The morning sun filtered through the old magnolia trees lining Broughton Street, casting dappled shadows on the weathered brick facade of Sweet Corner Cafe. Inside, Delaney Prince adjusted her apron for the third time that morning, a habit born of exhaustion rather than necessity. The ancient ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, doing little to combat the thick savannah heat that had already begun to settle in, despite the early hour. "Just order up for table 6, called out Jerome from the kitchen, his voice carrying the same cheerful tone it had maintained for the 15 years he'd run the cafe's kitchen. Delaney grabbed the plates, muscle memory guiding her movements. As she balanced the heavy ceramic dishes on her forearm, she caught her reflection in the chrome coffee maker, dark circles under her eyes, betraying another sleepless night spent going over bills and budget sheets. Her box braids were pulled back in a neat bun, but a few rebellious strands had escaped, framing her face. The delicate gold chain around her neck caught the light, and her hand instinctively reached up to touch the small pendant, her mother's last gift. "You good, D?" Jerome's concerned voice broke through her momentary reverie. "You've been standing there for a minute." Delaney forced a smile, one she'd perfected over years of customer service. "Just thinking about Amara's college applications. The deadlines are coming up faster than I expected." The truth was more complicated. Last night, she'd found another past-due notice in the mail, between Amara's upcoming college expenses and their mounting medical bills from Mum's final months. The numbers refused to add up, no matter how many extra shifts she picked up. The bell above the door chimed, pulling her attention back to the present. The morning rush was about to begin, and with it, the familiar dance of coffee orders, scrambled eggs, and southern hospitality that paid their bills, most of them anyway. Delaney moved through the cafe with practiced grace, refilling coffee cups and taking orders. Each table got her signature smile, the one that made regulars feel like old friends and tourists write glowing reviews about southern charm. Nobody needed to know about the knot in her stomach or the weight of responsibility that pressed down on her shoulders. The morning crowd thinned around 10, leaving only a few regulars nursing their coffees. Delaney was wiping down the counter when the bell chimed again. She looked up, ready with her welcome smile, and froze. A man stood in the doorway, tall and distinguished, in a way that seemed almost out of place in their modest establishment. His dark suit spoke of old money, but there was something in his bearing that suggested discomfort rather than arrogance. Behind him, partially hidden, was a little girl with blonde pigtails and eyes that seemed too serious for her small face. "Welcome to Sweet Corner," Delaney called out, watching as the girl clutched what appeared to be a well-loved stuffed rabbit closer to her chest. The man guided the child to a booth by the window, his movements careful and measured, as if he was operating on autopilot. There was something familiar about his features. She'd seen that face before, probably in the local papers or charity events she couldn't afford to attend. As Delaney approached their table, she noticed more details: the slight tremor in the man's hands as he opened the menu, the way the little girl's eyes darted around the room, taking everything in with an alertness that seemed beyond her years, the empty space beside them that somehow felt like a presence of its own. "Can I start you folks off with something to drink?" Delaney asked, pulling out her notepad. The man looked up, and for a brief moment their eyes met. His were a stormy blue-gray, carrying shadows that Delaney recognized all too well, the kind that came from losing someone irreplaceable. She'd seen those same shadows in her own mirror too many times to count. "Coffee, black," he said, his voice soft but clear. "And for my daughter." He trailed off, looking at the little girl expectantly. The child didn't speak, just pressed herself closer to her father's side. Delaney knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with the girl. "You know what I think would be perfect on a morning like this? Our special hot chocolate. We make it with real chocolate and top it with whipped cream and just a tiny pinch of cinnamon. What do you say?" For the first time, the little girl's expression changed. Her eyes widened slightly, and she nodded, the movement so small it was barely perceptible. "One special hot chocolate it is." Delaney smiled, standing back up. "I'll give you folks a few minutes with the menu." As she walked away, she could feel the man's gaze following her. Not in the way some customers did. This was different, almost like recognition, not of her face, but of something deeper, something they shared without words. At the counter, while preparing their drinks, Delaney found herself glancing back at the odd pair. The man was pointing at something on the menu, speaking softly to his daughter, who still clutched her rabbit but seemed less tense than when they'd arrived. There was a story there, Delaney thought, carefully adding the whipped cream to the hot chocolate. In this line of work, you learn to read people, to see the weight they carried in the slope of their shoulders or the way they stirred their coffee. These two were carrying something heavy, something that felt achingly familiar. She didn't know then, as she arranged the drinks on her tray, that this morning would mark the beginning of something, that sometimes life's biggest changes arrive in the quietest moments, wrapped in the ordinary disguise of a coffee order and a child's hesitant smile. The ceiling fan continued its lazy spin, and outside, the magnolias released their sweet scent into the morning air. Just another day at Sweet Corner Cafe, except it wasn't. Not really, not anymore. 3 days had passed since the man and his daughter first visited Sweet Corner Cafe, and Delaney couldn't shake the memory of those storm cloud eyes. She was wiping down tables after the lunch rush when her sister Amara burst through the door, backpack slung over one shoulder, radiating the particular brand of teenage excitement that usually meant either very good or very concerning news. "You're never going to believe what I found out." Amara dropped into her usual corner booth, her braids adorned with golden cuffs, catching the afternoon light. At 16, she was already taller than Delaney, though she still had their mother's gentle features. "Let me guess, they finally fixed the vending machine in the school cafeteria," Delaney teased, sliding into the seat across from her sister. Amara rolled her eyes. "No, this is actually important. You know that guy who came in with his daughter the other day? The one you wouldn't stop talking about?" "I mentioned him once," Delaney protested, though she could feel warmth creeping into her cheeks. 3 times. I counted." Amara's grin widened. "Anyway, he's Beckett Ward. You know, the guy who designed half the historical renovations downtown. He's like, seriously important in the preservation community." Delaney's hand went to her mother's necklace, a nervous habit she'd never managed to break. "How do you even know about that?" "Because unlike some people, I actually read the local news. Plus, we just did a whole unit on Savannah's architectural preservation in history class." Amara pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. "He was all over the papers a few years ago when his wife died. It was really sad. She passed away during childbirth. That little girl you saw, she's never even—" "Stop!" Delaney cut her off, perhaps more sharply than intended. "That's not our business, Amara." The excitement drained from her sister's face, replaced by a familiar look of concern. "I just thought, I don't know, you seemed interested in them." Delaney stood up, straightening her apron. "I'm interested in making sure our customers are comfortable and well served. That's my job." As if on cue, the bell above the door chimed. Delaney turned, and there he was, Beckett Ward, this time without his daughter. He wore a navy blazer over a light blue shirt, looking simultaneously put together and exhausted. Their eyes met across the cafe, and for a moment, neither moved. "I'll get started on my homework," Amara said quietly, pulling out her textbooks with a knowing smile that Delaney chose to ignore. Beckett took a seat at the counter, and Delaney approached, notepad in hand, more out of habit than necessity. "Black coffee?" He looked surprised, then pleased. "You remembered. It's what I do." She grabbed a mug from beneath the counter. "No little one today?" "Eliza's at her piano lesson." He spoke her name softly, like a prayer. "Then I had a meeting nearby and thought—" He trailed off, as if unsure how to finish the sentence. Delaney poured his coffee, noting how his fingers tapped an irregular rhythm on the counter. "The chocolate chip cookies are fresh out of the oven," she offered. "They're pretty good for thinking fuel." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close. "I'll trust your judgment." As she placed a cookie on a small plate, she could feel Amara's eyes on her back. "First time at piano lessons." Beckett looked up sharply. "How did you—" "The tapping." Delaney gestured to his fingers, still drumming against the counter. "Plus, you've checked your phone 3 times since sitting down." He stilled his hands, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. "That obvious?" "Huh. I raised my sister through her flute phase. The first few lessons are always the hardest on the parents." The words slipped out before she could catch them, and she saw the question form in his eyes. "You raised—" "My sister, Amara." Delaney nodded toward the corner booth, where Amara pretended to be deeply absorbed in her textbook. Our mom passed away 2 years ago. The words hung between them, heavy with shared understanding. Beckett's eyes softened, and he wrapped his hands around the coffee mug as if seeking warmth. "Does it?" he started, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "Does it get easier?" Delaney thought about the nights she still woke up reaching for her phone to call her mother, about the growing collection of unopened bills in her dresser drawer, about Amara's college dreams, and the weight of being both sister and parent. "Not easier," she said, finally. "Just different. You learn to carry it better." He nodded, and in that moment she saw past the expensive blazer and architectural acclaim. She saw a father trying to raise a daughter alone, a man carrying grief like a second shadow. "Eliza talks about your hot chocolate," he said after a while. "She called it magic in a cup yesterday." Delaney smiled, remembering the little girl's face lighting up at the first sip. "The secret ingredient is love," she said, then immediately felt foolish. "I mean, technically it's cinnamon, but love works too." This time, his smile reached his eyes, transforming his entire face. "She also mentioned something about a story you told her, about a brave rabbit." "Oh, that—" Delaney busied herself with wiping down the already clean counter. "I noticed her stuffed rabbit and just made something up. About how sometimes the bravest thing a rabbit can do is make a new friend." Beckett was quiet for so long that Delaney finally looked up. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Thank you," he said simply. "It's been a long time since I've heard her talk so much about anything, really." Before Delaney could respond, his phone buzzed. "The lesson's over," he said, standing and reaching for his wallet. "I should go." "Of course." Delaney rang up his coffee and cookie, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest when their fingers brushed during the card transaction. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, and there was something vulnerable in the question. "We'll be here," Delaney said, "with plenty of magic hot chocolate." After he left, Amara appeared at her side. "So, not interested, huh?" Delaney threw her cleaning rag at her sister. "Why don't you have trigonometry to figure out?" "I'm just saying," Amara sang, dancing away from Delaney's half-hearted swat. "You smiled more in the last 15 minutes than you have all week. Go, do your homework." But as Delaney returned to her tasks, she found herself glancing at the door more often than usual, thinking about storm cloud eyes and gentle smiles, about brave rabbits and the different ways people learn to carry their grief. Outside, the afternoon sun painted the old buildings in shades of gold, and somewhere in the city, a little girl was telling her father about the magic of hot chocolate and rabbit stories. And in Sweet Corner Cafe, Delaney Prince touched her mother's necklace and wondered if maybe, just maybe, some storms could bring more than rain. The sky opened up without warning, sending sheets of rain cascading over Savannah's cobblestone streets. Delaney watched from Sweet Corner's window as people scurried for cover, their umbrellas blooming like sudden flowers against the grey afternoon. It was nearly closing time, and the cafe stood empty, except for Jerome humming in the kitchen and the steady drumming of rain against the windows. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amara. "Drama club running late. Don't worry, Keisha's mum will drop me off." Delaney typed back a quick acknowledgement, trying to ignore the familiar twist of guilt in her stomach. How many after-school activities had Amara missed because they couldn't afford the transportation? How many times had they relied on other parents' kindness? The bell chimed, bringing with it a gust of wet air and the sound of running feet. Delaney turned to find Eliza Ward, soaked and breathless, her pigtails dripping onto the floor. Behind her, equally drenched, came Beckett, holding a broken umbrella and wearing an expression of helpless apology. "I'm so sorry," he started, but Delaney was already moving, grabbing clean towels from behind the counter. "Looks like someone caught you by surprise," she said, kneeling to wrap a towel around Eliza's shoulders. The little girl's bright yellow raincoat had done little to keep her dry, and she clutched a plastic-wrapped bundle that Delaney recognized as sheet music. "Piano got cancelled," Eliza said softly, the first words Delaney had ever heard her speak. Her voice was small but clear, like a bell in the distance. "Miss Andrews has the flu," Beckett explained, accepting a towel with a grateful nod. "Time we found out when we got there, and then the sky just exploded," Eliza finished, with unexpected enthusiasm. Like in the stories, Delaney raised an eyebrow at Beckett, who mouthed thunder over his daughter's head. Understanding dawned. The little girl's fear of loud noises had been transformed into something magical through her father's stories. "Well then," Delaney said, straightening up, "I think this calls for emergency hot chocolate. Can't let any story explosion survivors go uncheered, can we?" A smile broke across Eliza's face, bright as sunshine after rain. She climbed onto a stool at the counter, carefully placing her wrapped music sheets beside her. Toby the rabbit, somehow having survived the downpour relatively unscathed, took his usual place next to her. "I'll get you both something warm to eat too," Delaney added, catching the way Beckett's shoulders relaxed at his daughter's smile. "Jerome's chicken soup is legendary on rainy days." "We don't want to be any trouble," Beckett protested. "You're about to close." "Nonsense," Jerome called from the kitchen doorway, having caught the last part of the conversation. "Rain like this, staying open a bit longer is just good business sense." Delaney shot Jerome a grateful look as she started preparing the hot chocolate. He winked back before disappearing into the kitchen, the clatter of pots following in his wake. As she worked, she watched Beckett help Eliza out of her wet raincoat, his movements gentle but efficient. There was such care in the way he handled her things, such attention in how he made sure she was comfortable. It made something in Delaney's chest ache, recognition, perhaps, of what it meant to be both parent and protector. "The rain isn't really from an explosion, is it?" Eliza asked suddenly, her eyes serious as she watched Delaney sprinkle cinnamon on her hot chocolate. Beckett tensed slightly, but Delaney didn't miss a beat. "Well, what do you think?" Eliza considered this, fingers absently stroking Toby's ear. I think maybe the clouds are crying, but not because they're sad. Sometimes when I'm happy, I cry too." The simple wisdom of her words hung in the air. Beckett's hand, reaching for his coffee, froze midway. Delaney felt something shift in the atmosphere, like a door opening to a room they hadn't known was there. "That's very true," Delaney said softly. "My mama used to say rain was the sky's way of washing everything clean, making room for new beginnings. Is your mama in heaven too?" Eliza's question was innocent, but it landed like a physical weight. "Eliza?" Beckett started, but Delaney shook her head slightly. "Yes, she is," she answered, meeting Eliza's eyes. "Just like your mama." Eliza nodded solemnly, as if confirming something she'd already known. "Do you think they know each other? Up there, baby?" Beckett's voice cracked slightly. "Maybe we shouldn't." "It's okay," Delaney assured him, even as her hand went to her mother's necklace. "And you know what, Eliza? I bet they do. I bet they're up there right now, watching us enjoy this hot chocolate and feeling very proud of their brave girls." Thunder rumbled outside, but Eliza didn't flinch. Instead, she took a long sip of her drink, leaving a whipped cream mustache that made both adults smile. "Soup's up," Jerome announced, emerging with 3 steaming bowls. "Can't send anyone out in this weather without proper fortification." They ate together at the counter, the rain creating a cozy backdrop to their quiet conversation. Eliza told them about her piano pieces, simple nursery rhymes that she practiced with determined focus. Beckett shared stories about the buildings he was helping restore, his eyes lighting up when he described the history hidden in their walls. Delaney found herself talking about her dream of owning a cafe bookstore, surprised by how easy it was to voice this secret hope aloud. As the rain began to ease, Beckett checked his watch and sighed. "We should get going. I've kept you well past closing." "It was worth it," Delaney said, meaning it more than she'd expected to. While Beckett helped Eliza back into her raincoat, Delaney quickly packed up some cookies in a paper bag. "For later," she said, handing them to Eliza. "Brave girls need brave snacks." Eliza took the bag with both hands, then did something unexpected. She hugged Delaney's legs tightly. "Thank you for making the thunder not scary." Delaney blinked back sudden tears, patting the little girl's damp head. When she looked up, she found Beckett watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between gratitude and longing, hope and fear. "Drive safe," she managed to say as they headed for the door. "See you tomorrow?" Beckett asked, and there was that vulnerability again, that quiet hope. "Same time as always," she promised. After they left, Delaney stood at the window, watching their car pull away into the misty evening. Jerome appeared beside her, drying his hands on a kitchen towel. "You know what your mama would say about all this, don't you?" he asked gently. Delaney nodded, touching her necklace one last time. That sometimes the best gardens grow after the hardest rains. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the streets gleaming like black glass under the emerging stars. Somewhere in the city, a father and daughter drove home, sharing cookies and carrying a little bit of Sweet Corner's warmth with them. And in the quiet of the empty cafe, Delaney Prince let herself wonder if maybe, just maybe, her mother had been right about new beginnings. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, its official letterhead stark against the pile of junk mail. Delaney's hands trembled as she read it at the kitchen table of their small apartment, the morning sun casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. The medical collection agency's message was clear: pay the outstanding balance of their mother's hospital bills within 30 days or face legal action, $20,000. The number blurred before her eyes, impossibly large. She'd been making minimum payments, juggling bills like a circus performer, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jerome, taking a sick day. Can you handle opening? Delaney pressed her palms against her eyes, forcing back tears. Sweet Corner was already short-staffed, and Tuesday mornings were always busy. But Jerome never took sick days unless he absolutely had to. Of course, she texted back. Feel better. She glanced at the clock, 5:45 a.m. Amara was still asleep, her college application essays scattered across the coffee table where she'd been working late into the night. Dreams scribbled on paper, each one carrying a price tag Delaney couldn't bear to calculate. The drive to Sweet Corner was a blur of early morning fog and worried calculations. She'd saved some money, but between Amara's upcoming college expenses and their regular bills, it was nowhere near enough. Maybe she could pick up more shifts, or find a second job, or... Her thoughts scattered as she pulled into the cafe's parking lot and saw a familiar figure waiting by the door. Beckett stood there in a charcoal grey suit, holding 2 paper cups from the chain coffee shop down the street. I know you're not open yet, he said as she approached, but I was hoping we could talk. Something in his tone made her stomach twist. She unlocked the door, flipping on lights as they entered the empty cafe. The silence felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken words. I brought you coffee, he offered, holding out one of the cups. I realize now that might be like bringing sand to the beach. Actually, I never get to drink our coffee, she admitted, accepting the cup, too busy making it for everyone else. They sat at the counter, the morning darkness still pressing against the windows. Beckett's fingers drummed against his cup, that nervous habit she'd come to recognize. Eliza asked if you could come to her piano recital, he said finally. It's this Saturday. Delaney's heart warmed even as anxiety gnawed at her edges. That's so sweet of her to... I told her no. The words fell between them like stones. Delaney's hand froze halfway to her mother's necklace. I think, Beckett continued, his voice carefully controlled, we need to establish some boundaries. Boundaries, Delaney repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. Eliza's becoming very attached to you. And He paused, running a hand through his hair. I can't let her get hurt again. I can't let her build relationships that might not... Might not what? Delaney's voice was sharper than intended. Last. Be real. What exactly are you implying? That's not... Beckett stood abruptly, pacing behind his stool. You have to understand. After her mother... Eliza doesn't handle loss well. Neither do I. And this, whatever this is, it's becoming too... Too what? Delaney challenged, rising as well. Too personal, too real. Heaven forbid someone actually crack that perfect facade you've built. She saw the words hit him, saw his shoulders stiffen. You don't understand. No, I think I understand perfectly. The collection letter burned in her memory. You're not the only one protecting someone, Mr. Ward. You're not the only one who's lost things. This isn't about... The door chimed. They both turned to see Eliza standing there with an elderly woman, her grandmother, Delaney realized, recognizing her from photos Eliza had shown her. Daddy? Eliza's voice was small. You said you were getting coffee. Beckett's face shifted, the mask of careful control sliding back into place. I did, sweetheart. I was just discussing some business with Miss Prince. The word business hit Delaney like a physical blow. After weeks of conversations, shared stories, and quiet understanding, she was back to being Miss Prince, the helpful server, nothing more. "I should start preparing for opening," she said, her professional smile feeling like plastic on her face. "Your usual table is free." "We're actually heading to school early today," Beckett said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Piano practice before class." Eliza's face fell. "But what about hot chocolate?" "Not today, sweetheart." Beckett's voice was gentle but firm. "Say goodbye to Miss Prince." Eliza looked between them, her young face clouded with confusion. "But the recital—" "Come on, Eliza." Beckett held out his hand. "We don't want to be late." Delaney watched them leave, Eliza's backward glance carrying a weight no 6-year-old should have to bear. The grandmother followed, giving Delaney an apologetic smile that somehow made everything worse. Once they were gone, Delaney mechanically began her opening routine. Fill the coffee makers, check the pastry case, wipe down tables. Each movement felt disconnected, like she was watching someone else go through the motions. Her phone buzzed. A text from Amara. "Found my dream school's application fee waiver. Things are looking up." Delaney stared at the message, then at the empty cafe where just yesterday she'd shared stories and smiles with a man and his daughter. The morning sun finally broke through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor, highlighting every crack and imperfection in the old tiles. She touched her mother's necklace, remembering something her mom used to say, "Baby, sometimes people push you away not because they don't care, but because they care too much. Fear makes fools of us all." The first customers would arrive soon. She had bills to pay, a sister to support, and a cafe to run. She couldn't afford to dwell on storm cloud eyes or little girls with brave hearts. She couldn't afford a lot of things. But as she tied her apron and prepared to face another day, Delaney couldn't help but think about boundaries, the ones we build to protect ourselves, and the ones that end up becoming our prisons. She thought about fear and loss, and the way some people curl into themselves like injured animals, mistaking solitude for safety. The coffee maker hummed to life, its familiar sound grounding her in the present. Outside, Savannah was waking up, unaware that in a small cafe on Broughton Street, two hearts were learning the hard way that sometimes protecting the ones we love means knowing when to hold on and when to let go. 3 days had passed since Beckett's early morning visit, and the absence of him and Eliza felt like a physical presence in Sweet Corner Cafe. Delaney caught herself preparing hot chocolate with cinnamon at piano lesson time, only to remember there would be no wide-eyed little girl to serve it to, no stuffed rabbit keeping watch from the counter, no quiet conversations about brave things and new beginnings. "You're doing it again," Amara said from her homework spot, not looking up from her calculus textbook. "Doing what?" "That thing where you pretend you're not sad but keep touching Mum's necklace every 30 seconds. Amara finally looked up, her eyes too knowing for Delaney's comfort. "You miss them." "I miss our regular customers." "Business," Delaney corrected, pulling out receipts to review. The collection letter sat heavy in her apron pocket, a constant reminder of reality's harsh edges. "Right. Because that totally explains why you've been stress-baking enough cookies to feed all of Savannah." As if on cue, Jerome emerged from the kitchen with another tray of chocolate chip cookies. He'd been watching Delaney with worried eyes all week, quietly covering extra tasks without being asked. "Speaking of feeding Savannah," he said, setting down the tray, "you need to go home, D. I've got closing covered. I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm telling—" His tone was gentle but firm. "You've been here since 5 a.m. again. 3rd day in a row. Whatever you're running from, it won't get better if you work yourself sick." Delaney opened her mouth to protest, but the bell above the door chimed. She turned, her professional smile already in place, and froze. An elegant older woman stood in the doorway, her silver hair swept into a classic chignon. Delaney recognized her immediately. Beckett's mother-in-law, Eliza's grandmother. She carried herself with the kind of grace that spoke of old money and older traditions, but there was kindness in her eyes as she approached the counter. "Miss Prince." Her voice was warm, cultured. "I wonder if we might talk." Delaney glanced at Jerome, who nodded. "Take my office," he said. "Thanks, I'll bring you both some tea." The office was really more of a storage room with a desk wedged between boxes of supplies, but Mrs. Ward, "Please, call me Catherine," settled into the spare chair as if it were a throne in a palace. "I hope you'll forgive my interference," Catherine began, accepting the tea Jerome brought with a gracious smile. But I've watched my son make enough mistakes in his grief. I'm not inclined to let him make another one. Delaney's hands wrapped around her own teacup, seeking warmth. Mrs. Ward, Catherine, I respect your son's decisions regarding his daughter. He's right to be protective. He's right to be protective, Catherine agreed. But wrong to be afraid, there's a difference. She paused, studying Delaney with eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully maintained composure. Did you know that before this week, Eliza hadn't mentioned her mother in over a year? Delaney shook her head. My daughter, Rachel, was sunshine personified. She filled every room with light. When we lost her, Catherine's voice caught slightly. Beckett built walls around himself and Eliza. He thought he was protecting them both, but he was really just keeping them frozen in their grief. She reached into her handbag, pulling out a carefully folded piece of paper. Eliza drew this yesterday. The drawing was done in bright crayon colors. 3 figures standing in front of what was clearly meant to be Sweet Corner Cafe. A tall man in blue, a little girl in yellow holding a brown rabbit, and a woman with dark skin and curly hair, drawn in various shades of brown. They were all smiling, and above them, in a child's careful printing, my family. She gave it to her art therapist. Catherine continued as Delaney stared at the drawing. The first time she's drawn a family picture that included someone besides Beckett and herself since Rachel died. I never meant to, Delaney started, but couldn't finish the thought. To what? To show kindness. To make my granddaughter feel safe enough to smile again. To remind my son that there's still life to be lived. Catherine set her teacup down with a decisive clink. Beckett thinks he's protecting Eliza from more loss. What he doesn't see is that by closing themselves off from love, they've been losing little pieces of themselves every day. Delaney touched her necklace, thinking of her own walls, her own fears. It's not that simple. Of course it's not simple. Love never is. Catherine's eyes softened. But sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be loved, even knowing we might get hurt. Even if we can't promise forever, Delaney asked, thinking of the collection letter, of college applications, of all the uncertainties crowding her life, especially then. Catherine stood, smoothing her immaculate skirt. No one can promise forever, dear. Not really. All we can promise is right now, this moment, and our best intentions for the next one. She pulled another paper from her bag, a program for a children's piano recital. Saturday, 2 o'clock, Savannah Music Academy. She placed it on the desk. No pressure, no expectations. Just a little girl who would very much like to share her brave moment with someone who helped her find her courage. After Catherine left, Delaney sat in the office for a long time, looking at the crayon drawing and the recital program. Through the thin walls, she could hear the familiar sounds of the cafe, coffee grinding, plates clinking, quiet conversations, the soundtrack to her days, as steady as a heartbeat. Her phone buzzed. A text from Amara. Got my essay draft done. Can you read it tonight? Looking at her sister's message, Delaney thought about promises and protection, about walls and what they really keep out. She thought about her mother, who had always said that love wasn't something you could save up like money in a bank. It was more like bread. You had to make it fresh every day, share it while it was warm, trust that tomorrow would bring ingredients for more. The collection letter still sat in her apron pocket, its weight unchanged. The future was still uncertain, full of challenges she couldn't control. But maybe Catherine was right. Maybe bravery wasn't about being unafraid. Maybe it was about being afraid and choosing love anyway. She looked at the drawing one more time, at the smiling figures, at the careful way Eliza had drawn them holding hands. Then she picked up her phone and started a text to Jerome about Saturday's shift. Outside her window, a magnolia tree dropped its petals onto the sidewalk, white against grey concrete, like pages of a new story, waiting to be written, like possibilities scattered and fragile and real. Saturday afternoon found Delaney standing outside the Savannah Music Academy, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her best dress, a deep purple wrap style that had been her mother's favorite. The historic building loomed before her, its brick facade adorned with classical columns that made her feel small and somehow underdressed, despite having spent an hour choosing her outfit. You look beautiful, Amara assured her, adjusting her own sundress. She'd insisted on coming along, claiming she needed a break from college essays, But Delaney suspected her sister had other motives. "Stop fidgeting with your necklace." Delaney forced her hands to her sides, trying to quiet the flutter of nerves in her stomach. What if Beckett didn't want her here? What if her presence upset Eliza instead of helping? What if— "We're going to be late," Amara said firmly, taking her arm and guiding her up the steps. "And all that overthinking isn't going to change anything except your blood pressure." The lobby was filled with parents and grandparents, their excited chatter echoing off the high ceiling. Delaney scanned the crowd, her heart doing a complicated flip when she spotted Beckett standing near the auditorium doors. He wore a navy suit that fit him perfectly, his usually casual hair styled with more care than usual. He was speaking with Catherine, his back to the entrance. "There they are," Amara whispered unnecessarily. "And you're squeezing my arm too tight." "Sorry," Delaney muttered, loosening her grip. "Maybe this was a mistake. We should—" But it was too late. Catherine had spotted them, her face lighting up with a warm smile. She said something to Beckett, who turned around. Their eyes met across the lobby, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. He looked surprised, but not angry. If anything, there was a softness in his expression that made Delaney's breath catch. Then Eliza appeared from behind him, wearing a pale blue dress with a matching ribbon in her hair, and everything else became background noise. "You came," the little girl's voice carried across the lobby, drawing several smiles from nearby parents. She started to run forward, then remembered where she was and walked very properly instead, though her whole body seemed to vibrate with excitement. "Of course I came," Delaney said, kneeling to meet her at eye level. "I couldn't miss my favorite pianist's debut." Eliza beamed, then noticed Amara and somehow smiled even wider. "You brought your sister, just like in the stories." "The stories?" Beckett asked, and Delaney realized he had approached while she was focused on Eliza. "About the brave rabbit's family," Eliza explained, as if this should be obvious. "His sister helps him be brave too." Something flickered in Beckett's eyes, understanding perhaps, or recognition. He looked at Delaney and Amara, really looked at them, as if seeing the shape of their shared struggles for the first time. "Mun all performers to the practice room," called out a woman with a clipboard, breaking the moment. "Parents and guests, please take your seats." "That's me." Eliza's excitement shifted slightly toward nervousness. She clutched Toby closer to her chest. "Remember what we practiced?" Delaney asked softly. Eliza nodded. "Deep breaths like the ocean waves, and Toby will watch from the front row." "Smart rabbit," Delaney smiled. "Break a leg, sweetheart." As Eliza hurried off with the other young performers, Beckett cleared his throat. "You didn't have to—" "Yes, she did," Catherine interrupted smoothly. "Now shall we find our seats? Amara, dear, would you help an old woman navigate these treacherous stairs?" Before anyone could protest, Catherine had linked arms with Amara and was steering her toward the auditorium, leaving Delaney and Beckett standing alone in the rapidly emptying lobby. "Your mother-in-law is quite determined," Delaney observed. "You have no idea," Beckett said, and there was something like a smile in his voice. He gestured toward the auditorium doors. "Shall we?" They found their seats just as the lights began to dim. Catherine had somehow arranged things so that Delaney sat between her and Beckett, with Amara on Catherine's other side. Toby the rabbit sat proudly in the front row, exactly as promised. The recital began with the youngest students. Each child approached the piano with varying degrees of nervousness and determination, playing simple melodies that sometimes stumbled but always found their way home. Parents recorded on phones, grandparents dabbed at proud tears, and the afternoon light filtered through tall windows, casting golden patterns across the stage. When Eliza's turn came, Delaney felt Beckett tense beside her. Without thinking, she reached over and squeezed his hand. He startled slightly but didn't pull away. Eliza walked to the piano with careful steps, her blue ribbon catching the light. She sat, adjusted her position just as her teacher had shown her, and took a deep breath like an ocean wave. The melody that filled the auditorium was simple. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, arranged for beginners. But Eliza played it with such focus, such genuine joy, that it became something more. Her small fingers found each note with deliberate care, and if she missed one or two, her confidence never wavered. Delaney felt tears prick at her eyes. Beside her, Beckett's hand tightened around hers. When she glanced at him, she saw a single tear tracking down his cheek. After the final note faded, there was a moment of perfect silence before the audience burst into applause. Eliza stood, remembered to bow, then looked straight at their row with a smile that could have lit up all of Savannah. The rest of the recital passed in a blur. Afterward, in the lobby full of proud families and excited children, Eliza ran to them clutching a participation certificate and a pink rose. "Did you see?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. "Did you hear how I didn't stop even when I made a mistake, and just like we practiced?" "You were amazing," Beckett said, scooping her up in a hug that lifted her feet off the ground. "Absolutely amazing. Just like a true artist," Catherine added, producing a small gift bag with a ribbon that matched Eliza's dress. "Can we get ice cream?" Eliza asked, still in her father's arms. "To celebrate, please." Beckett hesitated, looking at Delaney. Would you both like to join us?" Before Delaney could answer, Amara stepped forward. "Actually, Catherine promised to show me some old photographs of Savannah for my history project. Right, Catherine?" "Did I?" Catherine's innocent expression fooled no one. "Oh yes, of course. We should do that right now, in fact. Eliza, darling, save some ice cream for us." As Catherine and Amara made their exit, looking entirely too pleased with themselves, Delaney found herself fighting a smile. "They're not very subtle, are they?" "About as subtle as a marching band," Beckett agreed, his own lips twitching. He set Eliza down but kept hold of her hand. "So, ice cream." Delaney looked at them. This tall, elegant man with storm-cloud eyes and his daughter in her blue dress with her pink rose and her brave heart. She thought about walls and bridges, about fear and hope, about simple melodies that somehow become symphonies. "Ice cream sounds perfect," she said. As they walked out into the golden afternoon, Eliza slipped her free hand into Delaney's, humming "Twinkle, Twinkle" under her breath. Above them, the Spanish moss swayed in the gentle breeze, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed the hour, each note clear and true, like promises waiting to be kept. The late afternoon sun streamed through Sweet Corner's windows, turning everything golden. Delaney watched as Eliza concentrated on her math homework at her usual spot at the counter, her tongue poking out slightly as she worked through a subtraction problem. 2 weeks had passed since the recital, and their lives had settled into a new rhythm, one that felt both precious and precarious. "Need any help?" Delaney asked, sliding a fresh glass of milk next to Eliza's worksheets. "I got it," Eliza said with determination. "Daddy says I'm good with numbers, just like—" She paused, then finished quietly, "just like Mommy was." Delaney's heart squeezed. These moments had been coming more frequently. Little mentions of Rachel, tentative but real. Each one felt like a gift, a sign of trust she wasn't sure she deserved. The bell chimed, and Beckett entered, looking more disheveled than usual. His tie was slightly askew, and his normally neat hair showed signs of frustrated hands running through it. "Daddy!" Eliza's face lit up. "I did 3 whole pages. That's wonderful, sweetheart." But his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He caught Delaney's questioning look and mouthed, "Later." The next hour passed in their new normal routine. Eliza finished her homework, while Beckett made work calls in the corner. Delaney moved between customers, always finding reasons to pass by their spot, dropping off cookies or refilling drinks. As the cafe emptied for the evening lull, Amara burst through the door, practically vibrating with excitement. "It came," she announced, waving an envelope. The letter from Spellman came. Delaney froze, her hand tightening on the coffee pot she was holding. This was it, her sister's dream school, the one they'd stayed up late discussing, the one whose tuition numbers kept Delaney awake at night. "Don't open it," she managed to say, setting down the pot before she could drop it. "Not without you," Amara insisted, crossing to the counter. Beckett must have sensed the importance of the moment because he quietly gathered Eliza's books. "We should go." "Stay," Delaney found herself saying. "Please." He nodded, and they all watched as Amara's trembling fingers tore open the envelope. The silence stretched for an eternal moment as she unfolded the letter. "I got in," she whispered, then louder, "I got in." The cafe erupted in celebration. Delaney vaulted over the counter to hug her sister. Eliza clapped enthusiastically, even though she wasn't quite sure what was happening. Jerome emerged from the kitchen with a tray of fresh cookies, declaring impromptu celebration snacks for everyone. "I'm so proud of you," Delaney whispered into her sister's hair, trying to keep her voice steady. Mom would be so proud. It wasn't until later, after Amara had called what felt like everyone in Savannah and Jerome had insisted on closing up alone so they could celebrate, that reality began to sink in. Delaney stood in the parking lot, watching Amara show Eliza her acceptance letter, explaining what college was to the fascinated 6-year-old. "You're worried about the money," Beckett said quietly, coming to stand beside her. Delaney crossed her arms, fighting a shiver that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. "That obvious, huh?" I recognized the look. His voice was gentle. "It's the same one I see in the mirror when I think about Eliza's future." "It's not just tuition," Delaney found herself saying. "There's the medical bills from Mom's treatment, the debt we're still paying off." She stopped, realizing she was saying too much. "You're sorry, you don't need to hear all this." "What if I want to?" His question was soft but intense. "What if I want to know everything that worries you, everything that makes you smile, everything that—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in that now familiar gesture of uncertainty. "Beckett," she turned to face him fully. "What happened at work today?" He looked surprised at the change of subject, then resigned. "They offered me a project. A big one. Historic renovation in Charleston. That's good, right? It would mean moving for at least 6 months, possibly longer." The words hit like a physical blow. Delaney looked at Eliza, still chattering with Amara, her whole small world finally expanding beyond grief and careful distances. "When would you leave?" "I haven't accepted yet." His eyes met hers, filled with a storm of emotions. "I used to make decisions based purely on logic. What was best for my career, for Eliza's future security. But now I find myself thinking about morning coffee and bedtime stories, about piano practice and homework at the counter, about the way you always know when Eliza needs an extra cookie, or when I'm drowning in paperwork, about how for the first time since Rachel," his voice caught, "time for the first time in years, we feel like we're really living, not just surviving." A customer chose that moment to exit the cafe, making them step apart. The spell broke, reality rushing back in. Delaney thought about the collection agency's deadline, about college tuition and mounting bills, about how unfair it was that love always seemed to come with impossible choices. "We should get Eliza home," Beckett said finally. "It's getting late." "Right," Delaney agreed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Amara has scholarship applications to work on anyway." They gathered their respective sisters, exchanging goodnights that felt heavy with unspoken words. As Beckett's car pulled away, Eliza waving from the back window, Amara linked her arm through Delaney's. "You know," Amara said thoughtfully, "Mom always said love finds a way. Mom also said practical shoes were more important than fashion, but that didn't stop you from buying those platform sandals." "And I rocked those sandals." Amara bumped her shoulder. "Just like you're rocking this whole falling in love while juggling responsibilities thing." "I'm not falling in love," Delaney protested automatically. "Sure you're not." Amara's smile was knowing. "And I'm not going to be a Spellman woman." Later that night, after Amara had finally fallen asleep surrounded by scholarship forms, Delaney sat at their small kitchen table with her bills spread out before her. The numbers hadn't changed, but somehow they looked different now. Less like a wall and more like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Her phone lit up with a text from Beckett. Eliza asked if brave rabbits ever have to say goodbye. Before she could respond, another message appeared. "I told her sometimes the bravest thing is finding ways to stay." Delaney touched her mother's necklace, thinking about courage and choices, about love and logistics, about all the ways people find to build bridges across the gaps that life creates. Outside, Savannah's night was alive with the sound of crickets and distant jazz from the riverside. Somewhere in the city, a father was tucking his daughter into bed, maybe telling her stories about brave rabbits and the people who loved them enough to find a way through any storm. Delaney looked at the bills again, then at her sister's acceptance letter proudly displayed on the refrigerator. Sometimes, she thought, the bravest thing isn't facing our fears alone. It's letting others help us carry them. The collection notice arrived on a Thursday, marked Final Warning, in angry red letters. Delaney stared at it in Sweet Corner's back office, the morning sun barely creeping through the small window. 5 days left until the deadline. The numbers swam before her eyes. $20,000. Impossible as a mountain. Her phone buzzed with a text from Beckett. "Can we talk? It's important." The Charleston job. He'd been quiet about it all week, but the deadline for his decision was approaching too. Everything was coming due at once, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Meet me after closing," she texted back. His response came quickly. "I'll bring dinner." The day passed in a blur of coffee orders and careful smiles. Amara stopped by after school, proudly showing off another scholarship application completed. Jerome watched Delaney with worried eyes as she moved through her tasks with mechanical precision, but he didn't push when she assured him she was fine. Evening arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. After the last customer left, Delaney found herself arranging and rearranging sugar packets, waiting. The bell chimed, and there was Beckett holding takeout bags from her favorite Thai place, looking as uncertain as she felt. "No Eliza?" she asked, noting his solitude. "With Catherine." She sensed we needed. He gestured vaguely between them. "This?" They set up dinner at a corner table, the food untouched between them. Outside, a summer storm was brewing, thunder rumbling in the distance. "I have to give them an answer tomorrow," Beckett said finally. "Tie about Charleston." Delaney nodded, her fingers finding her mother's necklace. And I've been trying to think logically. The money's good, better than good. It would secure Eliza's future, her education. It's the kind of project that could define my career." He paused, watching her. "But every time I try to say yes, I see her face light up when she walks into this cafe. I hear her laughing with you over hot chocolate. I watch her becoming herself again, not just an echo of grief, and You can't put a price on healing," Delaney said softly. "No." His hand reached across the table, hesitating just short of touching hers. "But I also can't ignore the practical realities of raising a child alone." The final notice seemed to burn in Delaney's pocket. She understood practical realities all too well. "What does Eliza say about moving?" "She asked if you and Amara could come with us." His laugh was pained. "She has this idea that families stick together, no matter what. I don't know where she got that from. Probably from those rabbit stories." Delaney attempted a smile. "I might have gone overboard with the moral lessons." Lightning flashed outside, followed by a closer rumble of thunder. The storm was almost here. "There's something else," Beckett said, his voice changing. "Something I need to tell you." But before he could continue, the cafe's door burst open. Amara stood there, soaked from the beginning rain, clutching a handful of papers. "I got it!" she exclaimed, then stopped short at seeing Beckett. "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But I got the Garrison Foundation scholarship, full ride. They're going to pay for everything, tuition, books, room and board, everything." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Delaney stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "Everything, everything." Amara was crying now, or maybe it was just rain on her face. "All those extra essays were worth it. I can go to Spelman without—" She trailed off, suddenly looking guilty. "Without bankrupting me," Delaney finished, pulling her sister into a fierce hug. "Without either of us having to worry." Over Amara's shoulder, she saw Beckett watching them with an unreadable expression. He stood slowly, gathering his untouched food. "I should go," he said quietly. "Let you celebrate." "No, wait." Delaney pulled back from Amara. "You were going to tell me something." He looked between the sisters, at their joy and tears and shared dreams finally within reach. "It can wait," he said. "Sois, this is your moment." But as he turned to leave, lightning illuminated the cafe in stark white, and Delaney saw something in his face that made her heart stop. Recognition. Understanding. "Goodbye, Beckett," she started, but he was already at the door. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said, and then he was gone, swallowed by the storm. Amara looked at the swinging door, then at her sister. What's going on?" Delaney sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. "So he's been offered a job in Charleston, a big one. They'd have to move." "Oh." Amara sat across from her, where Beckett had been moments before. "And you were going to tell him about the medical bills, about why you've been working double shifts." I was going to tell him everything. Delaney touched her necklace, an anchor in the storm. But now, maybe it's better this way. You've got your scholarship. I can focus on paying off Mum's bills without, she swallowed hard, without complicating things. That's the stupidest thing you've ever said. Amara's voice was gentle but firm. Love isn't a complication, Dee. It's a solution. Mom taught us that. Mom also taught us to be practical. No, Mom taught us to be brave. Amara reached across the table, taking her sister's hand. And sometimes being brave means letting people love you, even when you think you don't deserve it. Thunder crashed outside, and the rain came down harder, drumming against the windows like urgent fingers. Somewhere in the storm, a man was driving home to his daughter, maybe already composing the speech about their new adventure in Charleston. Somewhere in the city, a little girl was probably watching the lightning and wishing for hot chocolate with cinnamon. And in Sweet Corner Cafe, Delaney Prince held her sister's hand and thought about brave rabbits and practical shoes, about scholarship miracles and Charleston dreams, about all the ways love asks us to trust in possibilities we can't see through the storm. I have to close up, she said finally, standing. So that's not what you have to do at all, Amara replied, but she helped stack the chairs anyway, understanding that sometimes people need time to find their way to the truth they already know. Outside, the storm raged on, but storms always pass. The question was, what would be left standing when the sky cleared? And more importantly, who would be brave enough to step out into the aftermath and begin again? Morning arrived in Savannah with the particular stillness that follows a storm. Delaney opened Sweet Corner early, unable to sleep, the events of the previous night replaying in her mind. The cafe felt different somehow, emptier, despite nothing having changed. She was wiping down tables when Catherine walked in, looking more serious than Delaney had ever seen her. He signed the contract, Catherine said without preamble. This morning, the cleaning cloth froze mid-motion. Oh, without telling Eliza yet. Catherine sat at the counter, her usual grace tinged with weariness. He's planning to present it as an adventure, but we both know what he's really doing. Taking an amazing career opportunity, Delaney said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Running. Catherine's voice was sharp. He's running because he's afraid of building something real, something that could hurt him like losing Rachel did. She pulled an envelope from her purse. Which is why I'm breaking every rule of proper behavior by showing you this. Delaney took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, written in careful handwriting she recognized from piano homework. Dear Grandma Catherine, I had a bad dream that Daddy and I moved far away from Miss Delaney and Amara. In the dream, I couldn't have hot chocolate with cinnamon anymore, and Toby forgot all his brave rabbit stories. Daddy was sad again, like before. I don't want it to be real. Can you fix it? You always know how to fix things. Love, Eliza. She wrote this 3 days ago, Catherine said quietly. Children see more than we think, feel more than we give them credit for. Delaney read the letter again, her vision blurring. What am I supposed to do with this? That depends. Catherine stood, straightening her impeccable jacket. Do you love them? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Catherine's voice softened. The rest, money, distance, fear, those are just details. Important details. Yes, but not insurmountable ones. Not if there's love enough to face them. He's already signed the contract. Contracts can be amended. Projects can be managed remotely. Solutions exist for people willing to look for them. Catherine headed for the door, then paused. You know, Rachel used to say that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth working through the imperfect with. After Catherine left, Delaney stood alone in the quiet cafe, holding Eliza's letter and feeling the weight of choices not yet made. The morning sun caught her mother's necklace, sending light dancing across the walls. The bell chimed again. This time it was Jerome, earlier than usual, carrying a folder. Before you say anything, he announced, setting the folder on the counter. This isn't charity, it's investment. Delaney opened the folder and gasped. Inside was a business proposal. Detailed plans for expanding Sweet Corner into the empty space next door, transforming it into the cafe bookstore she'd always dreamed of. Jerome. I've been saving, he said firmly. How looking for the right investment? And you, Dee, with your dreams and your heart and your way with people, you're it. I want to be your business partner." "I can't," she whispered. "The medical bills are factored in." He opened the folder, pointing to the financial projections. "With Amara's scholarship covering college and this expansion bringing in new revenue, we can set up a payment plan that works." "I've already talked to the collection agency." Delaney stared at him. "When did you—" "Last night after you left. Amara told me about the scholarship, and I've had these plans ready for months, was just waiting for the right moment." He smiled gently. "Sometimes the universe has a way of lining things up if we're brave enough to see it." The door chimed a third time. Delaney looked up to see Beckett standing there, still in his suit from whatever early morning meeting had sealed his Charleston fate. He looked tired, older somehow, like a man carrying a weight he wasn't sure he wanted to bear. "I'll be in the kitchen," Jerome said quietly, taking the folder with him. "Try looking over those supply orders we definitely need to discuss later." Silence filled the cafe as Delaney and Beckett regarded each other across the space that suddenly felt both too large and too small. "I couldn't tell her," Beckett said finally. "I signed the papers, but when I got home and saw her sleeping, I couldn't wake her up to tell her we're leaving everything she loves. Again, everything." Delaney's voice was barely a whisper. "Everyone," he corrected, taking a step forward. "Delaney, I have something to show you," she interrupted, reaching for the letter Catherine had left. "And something to tell you. Actually, a lot of things to tell you. About medical bills and dreams of expansion and all the reasons I've been keeping my own walls up. I have things to tell you too." Another step closer. "About fear and guilt, and how watching you with Eliza makes me feel things I thought I'd never feel again. About how terrified that makes me." "I'm terrified too," she admitted. "Of letting people in, of needing help, of loving something I might lose. What if," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "what if we could be terrified together? What if there's a way to make this work, even with Charleston? What if there's a way you don't have to go to Charleston at all?" she countered. "Or at least, not permanently." He was close enough now that she could see the hope fighting with fear in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Delaney took a deep breath, touching her mother's necklace for courage. "I'm saying that maybe Catherine is right. Maybe love isn't about finding perfect solutions. Maybe it's about being brave enough to look for imperfect ones together." Outside, the morning sun had fully risen, turning the wet streets into mirrors reflecting possibilities. Inside Sweet Corner, two people stood on the edge of a different kind of bravery, the kind that comes after storms, when the hardest choices become the simplest ones. "Read this," Delaney said, holding out Eliza's letter. "Then let me tell you about Jerome's business proposal. And after that, maybe we can talk about all the ways brave rabbits find to stay together, even when the path looks impossible." Beckett took the letter, his fingers brushing hers. And then, she smiled, feeling the future crack open with hope. "I'll make us some hot chocolate, with extra cinnamon for courage." 6 months later, Sweet Corner and Stories prepared for its grand opening. Delaney stood in the newly expanded space, surrounded by freshly installed bookshelves and the scent of both coffee and new possibilities. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, illuminating the carefully arranged reading nooks and the small stage where they'd host story times and piano recitals. "The sign looks crooked," Amara said, home for the weekend from her first semester at Spelman. She stood with her hands on her hips, examining the hand-painted Story Hour corner sign above the children's section. "It's perfect," Delaney assured her, adjusting her mother's necklace, no longer a nervous habit, but a gesture of gratitude. The medical bills were being paid off steadily, thanks to Jerome's business plan and the cafe's growing success. Each payment felt like honoring her mother's memory, like turning past burdens into stepping stones. The bell above the door chimed. They'd kept it during the renovation, its familiar sound a bridge between old and new. Eliza burst in, wearing a blue dress that matched the cafe as new accent walls, her hair in more elaborate braids than usual. "Daddy's on the phone with Charleston again," she announced, making it sound like a far-off magical place rather than the source of so much anxiety months ago. "He's doing his serious voice, but he promised we'd still make it in time for my special job." Beckett had managed to negotiate a compromise with the Charleston project, consulting remotely, with just 1 week of on-site work each month. It wasn't perfect, but they were learning that perfect wasn't the goal. The goal was finding ways to build something real, something that could bend without breaking. "Size everything ready?" Eliza asked, bouncing on her toes as she surveyed the space. "Did you remember the special cookies? And Toby's bow tie?" "Everything's ready," Delaney assured her, smoothing a stray curl from the girl's forehead. "And yes, Toby's bow tie is pressed and waiting in the office." The stuffed rabbit had earned a place of honor in the children's corner, where he would sit during story times, a mascot for brave beginnings. They'd even added a tiny gold nameplate, Toby, chief storyteller and purveyor of courage. The door chimed again. This time it was Catherine, carrying a large photo album. "I found it," she announced triumphantly. Rachel's old pictures of the Historical Society events, perfect reference for the Heritage Wall. They'd decided to incorporate Savannah's architectural history into the cafe's decor, blending Beckett's passion with Delaney's vision. Each wall would tell a story, of buildings preserved, of communities connected, of past and present woven together like the Spanish moss in the trees outside. Jerome emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "Pie pastries are done, coffee's ready, and don't tell anyone, but I might have perfected a new chocolate chip cookie recipe for today's special occasion." "Is that why you've been sneaking around with secret ingredients all week?" Delaney teased. The familiar banter carrying the weight of their new partnership, equal stakes in this dream they were building together. The door chimed once more, and Beckett entered, looking slightly harried, but happy. "So sorry, the contractors had last-minute questions about the Charleston timeline, but we're all set now." He crossed to kiss Delaney's cheek, then ruffled Eliza's carefully done hair. "Ready for your big debut, storyteller?" Eliza nodded solemnly. They decided she would help lead the first children's story hour, reading from a book she and Delaney had written together about a brave rabbit who learned that home isn't just a place, it's the people who help you find your courage. 15 minutes until opening, Amara called, checking her watch. "And there's already a line forming outside." Delaney looked through the windows at the gathering crowd, regular customers mixed with new faces, all waiting to see what Sweet Corner had become. Her heart swelled with a mixture of nervousness and joy. "Everyone remember their positions?" she asked, falling into the familiar rhythm of preparing for a busy day. "Daddy and I are doing the ribbon cutting," Eliza recited proudly. "Then hot chocolate for everyone, with cinnamon for extra magic. Then story time, then piano practice in the music corner, then helping with the cookie samples, then breathing," Beckett interrupted gently, sharing an amused look with Delaney. "Remember what we said about not trying to do everything at once." "But everything is important," Eliza protested. "Yes," Delaney agreed, kneeling to meet her eyes. "But so is enjoying the moment. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is take things one step at a time." "Like the rabbit in the story?" Eliza asked. "Exactly like that." Delaney stood, taking in her assembled family, not the one she'd expected, but the one she'd found through loss and love and courage. "Ready?" They took their positions, Jerome behind the counter, Catherine arranging the history display, Amara manning the book section, Beckett and Eliza by the ribbon with ceremonial scissors. Delaney touched her mother's necklace one last time, sending a silent thank you to the woman who had taught her that love was worth any risk. As she moved to unlock the doors, she caught Beckett's eye. He smiled, that soft, real smile that still made her heart skip, and mouthed the words that had become their private promise. One day at a time. The doors opened. Sunshine and people poured in, filling the space with chatter and laughter. Eliza's voice rang out clear and strong, welcoming everyone to Sweet Corner and Stories. The coffee machines hummed, books were opened, stories began, and in that moment, Delaney understood what her mother had meant about love being like bread, something you make fresh every day, something that fills your home with warmth, something that tastes better when shared. She looked around at her expanded cafe, at the dreams taking shape in wood and words and coffee beans, at the family she'd built from broken pieces and brave choices. It wasn't perfect. There would still be hard days, busy days, days when Charleston felt too far and bills felt too close. But there would also be story times and piano practice, quiet moments over cooling coffee, and the constant reminder that the best tales aren't about avoiding storms. They're about learning to dance in the rain. The morning sun caught the edge of Toby's golden nameplate, sending light dancing across the wall of books. Outside, Savannah was waking up to another beautiful day, and inside Sweet Corner and Stories, a new chapter was beginning, one that tasted like cinnamon and hope, like courage and possibility, like love made fresh every morning, one day at a time, one story at a time, one brave choice after another, until fear became just another word for the moments before joy, and home became wherever brave hearts gathered to share their tales. The magnolia trees were blooming again, their sweet scent drifting through Sweet Corner and Stories' open windows. Outside, tourists and locals mingled on Broughton Street, some carrying books with the cafe as distinctive bookmark, a golden rabbit silhouette against a deep blue background. Inside, 7-year-old Eliza sat at her special corner of the counter, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration as she practiced a new piano piece. The upright piano, a gift from Catherine, had become a fixture in the cafe's reading nook, its warm wood matching the bookshelves that now lined the walls. "Time for your lesson, sweetheart," Beckett called, emerging from his small office, once the storage room where he and Delaney had shared their first difficult conversation. These days, he split his time between remote work for various preservation projects and helping manage the cafe's events and historical exhibits. "Just one more try," Eliza pleaded, her fingers hovering over the keys. "I want to get it perfect for tonight." Tonight was special. Amara was coming home for summer break, and they were having a family dinner to celebrate both her successful first year at Spelman and the cafe's 1-year anniversary as Sweet Corner and Stories. "Your sister just texted," Jerome announced to Delaney as he placed a fresh batch of his now famous cookies in the display case. "Her bus is running early. She'll be here in 20 minutes. Delaney smiled, touching the small key that now hung alongside her mother's necklace, the key to their new apartment above the cafe, where she and Beckett had decided to build their life together. It wasn't huge, but it was home, filled with books and music and the sound of Eliza's laughter. The last year hadn't been without its challenges. There were still days when grief visited unexpectedly, when bills needed juggling, when Beckett's trips to Charleston felt too long. But they'd learned to face each storm together, finding strength in their imperfect but beautiful harmony. The bell chimed its familiar welcome, and Catherine entered, carrying a large box wrapped in blue paper. "Don't tell me I'm late," she said, setting the package on the counter. "Right on time," Delaney assured her, eyeing the box. "So as though I thought we agreed no gifts." "This isn't a gift," Catherine replied with a wink. "It's a family heirloom, being passed along at exactly the right moment." Before Delaney could respond, the bell chimed again, and Amara burst in, her Spelman sweatshirt bright against the cafe's warm colors. "Surprise!" she called out, dropping her bags by the door. The cafe erupted in happy chaos. Eliza abandoned her piano practice to launch herself at Amara. Jerome emerged from the kitchen with a special welcome home cake. Beckett wrapped an arm around Delaney's waist as they watched their family reunite. Later, after the cafe had closed and dinner had been shared, Catherine insisted it was time to open the mysterious box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a leather-bound book with gold-edged pages. "It was Rachel's recipe journal," Catherine explained softly. But look at the last page." Delaney opened it carefully, finding a handwritten note in fresh ink. "For my daughter Eliza and her new mother Delaney. Sometimes the best recipes are the ones we create together. Like love, they require patience, courage, and a willingness to try again when things don't turn out perfectly the first time. All my love, Catherine." Beneath the note were blank pages, waiting to be filled. "For your own recipes," Catherine said. "Both the kind you bake and the kind you create in living and loving each day." Eliza touched the pages reverently, then looked up at Delaney with eyes that held both past and future. "Can we write down the hot chocolate recipe first? The magic one?" "Of course," Delaney said, holding her close. "And then maybe the story of a brave rabbit who helped 2 families become one." Outside, the magnolias continued their sweet song to the evening air. Inside Sweet Corner and Stories, a family gathered around an old recipe book and new memories, adding their own ingredients to a love story that was still being written, one page at a time, one recipe at a time, one brave heart after another, creating something even sweeter than they'd imagined possible. The end. Based on this moving story that explores profound themes such as love, loss, courage, and new beginnings, I'd like to ask you a reflective question. If you were in Beckett's or Delaney's shoes, would you choose to follow the safe and practical path, or would you risk everything for a second chance at love? Think about how the fear of suffering again can prevent us from living transformative experiences, just as it almost prevented our protagonists from building their beautiful story together. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.